I am standing on a country lane that marks the county boundary of two counties. The one to my left is the county borough of Wrexham, and the one to my right is Powys. The county borough of Wrexham has a total area of 193 square miles, while the county of Powys has a staggering total area of 2,000 square miles. The county of Powys is the largest principal area by land and area in Wales, and they cover the historic counties of Montgomeryshire, Radnorshire, and Brecknockshire. The churches in these historic counties form the churches of Powys, and most of these are situated in rural areas. This series will provide a further look in the buildings part of the Church in Wales and Covenanted Churches in Wales. I am Fabian Musto, and I present you the first season of Churches of Wales. The first episode of this season will take a look at the churches that follow the county boundary to the northwest. I will use the Ordnance Survey map on Geograph as my reference for spotting church symbols, from maps of the 1920s, to maps of the 2010s and 20s. I will begin my journey in the northernmost settlement in Powys, and that is the hamlet of Rhulas. The first church I am at is the Mission Church in Rhulas, situated on a country lane that has good countryside views to the northwest. Housed in this small building that may be Victorian, this church lost their regular Sunday services in January 2018, and the building has seen little use since then. There was another religious building in Rhulas, and this was a Calvinistic Methodist chapel, now a private dwelling. This vernacular and Romanesque style building dates from 1830, and is situated by the River Ogow. This was enlarged in 1851. I am now in another settlement, which is also a hamlet. This hamlet is situated 2 miles east of Rhulas, and this is Kevin Cannell. There is a Calvinistic Methodist chapel in the hamlet, which is 20 yards south of the border of Shropshire, England. This was built in 1820 and enlarged 3 years later, but the present building, which looks like a primary school building, was rebuilt in 1883 in the simple Gothic style. The chapel is situated a mile northwest of this tiny village, situated in Shropshire where their church is in Wales. It is part of the Church of England. I am at the next settlement where I will look at the first parish church in this series. This is an interesting one because the parish continues into Shropshire, England, and the church was part of the Anglican Church of Wales until it was disestablished in 1919. A referendum took place in 1920, and 53% of the 483 voters of the parish voted the church to be part of the Church in Wales. The churchyard contains 10 ancient yew trees on the north and east side of the grounds, and the church building was Grade 1 listed in January 1966. The West Bell Tower, which houses the west entrance to the building, was built in 1832. There was a previous tower on the site, which housed a wooden spire on top that burnt down. The interior of Llansilin Parish Church is a delight, and the medieval wagon ceiling in the chancel is my favourite feature. Behind me is a brass chandelier that dates from 1824, and behind that is the West Gallery, which is supported by a medieval timber frame. There are a number of buildings in Llansilin since it is a village, and is a parish that centres around the Church of St. Cilyn. Some of the buildings in Llansilin house religious buildings, and the Bettina Chapel, north of the parish church, is an example. This was built in 1839, and was used by the Calvinistic Methodists. This chapel is situated by the B4580 road, and is south of the village. There were 3 buildings on the site, starting in 1815, when it was known as Stent Chapel. It was rebuilt in 1832, and was rebuilt for the last time in 1871, built in the Lombard style. The Bethesda Independent Chapel held their last service on 21st of October 2010, and has been restored as a private house. The last chapel in Clansillan is the Salem Baptist Church, which was built in 1831. This building is in the vernacular style, and is situated outside the village to the north. This is the oldest surviving chapel building in the village. Here is the interior of Llangedwallada Parish Church, dedicated to Saint Cadwaladr. The building plan here consists of a nave and apse, with no chancel. Most of the building dates from the 19th century, since the settlement was made a parish in 1877. This was restored by William Spall in 1883. The building was Grade II listed in January 1966. Situated 2 miles south is the hamlet of Moylvre, where there is a former Carmel Baptist chapel. Built in 1826, this was repaired in 1862 and was used as a workshop in the late 20th century. Here is the parish church of St. Sedwin in Llangedwin, a building of many styles from the medieval times to the arts and crafts movement. The exterior looks Victorian, since Benjamin Ferry made extensive restorations to the church from 1869 to 1870. There is a dormer window in view that was added by Herbert Luck North in 1907. The Romanesque revival porch dates from 1840, presumably designed by Thomas Penson of Oswestry. This is one of the most interesting features of the church, and the detail on the entrance door is brilliant. The interior of this church consists of a nave and chancel with no external differentiation, and there is a south aisle to my left. The chancel has an effigy of a cleric with his missal, and this dates from the 14th century. The church was Grade II listed in June 2001. Situated 2 miles west of Llangedwin is Pentrafellan, where a Salem Calvinistic Methodist chapel can be found. Built in 1845, this vernacular-style structure was altered in 1926. Here is the Horeb Methodist chapel in this settlement, built in the sub-classical style in 1835. The building is situated by a crossroads. Here is a fantastic chapel in the rural settlement of Tyback, and this is the Calvinistic Methodist chapel of 1906, built on the site of a chapel from 1827. This arts and crafts Gothic building displays an imposing Art Nouveau window to the east, and the building was Grade II listed in July 2000. There is another chapel in Tyback that is older than the 1906 Calvinistic Methodist chapel, and this is Moriah Chapel, built in 1851 and altered in 1873. Situated by Tyback is the Church of St. Garman, originally built in the 13th century. The building was restored in 1886, and it does not have listed status as of June 2022. This is a bad sign because the building can be demolished at any moment. Here is a remote chapel situated north of Llanrhaeadr in Mochnant, where it is situated east of a mountain that is 2,227 feet high. I do not have much information on this building, but I believe this was a Calvinistic Methodist chapel that was built in the mid-19th century. The land the building sits on was up for sale some years back, and photographs of the interior were taken. Here is the parish church of St. Dobfan in Llanrhaeadr in Mochnant, first built in the 12th century. The bell tower behind me was built at the end of that century, but was mostly rebuilt in the 18th century. From 1578 to 1588, the vicar of the church was William Morgan. He is remembered as the translator of the first version of the entire Bible in Welsh, basing it on the original Bibles in Hebrew and Greek. Morgan published his translated version of the Bible in 1588, when he was still the vicar of the church. The interior of St. Dogfan Parish Church is unique, mainly because of the ceiling from the nave to chancel. The plan is also unique too, because the north and south aisles are situated beside the chancel. The font is housed in the north aisle, and this was built in 1665. The carved Gothic reredos in the chancel is neat, as it incorporates a carving of the Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. The interior was not favored by George Borrow in 1854, who described it as gloomy from the heaviness of the architecture. The building was Grade 2 star listed in January 1966. The village of Llanrheadr in Mochnant, like Llansilin, is a parish that has a few religious buildings in the settlement. The Sion Methodist Chapel, founded and built in 1834, was rebuilt to the designs of Shaler and Ridge of Oswestry in 1904. The Arts and Crafts building is a favorite of mine, and the Sunday school adjacent dates from 1892. The chapel was Grade 2 star listed in July 2000. Situated near the chapel is the former Tabernacle Independent Chapel, built in 1822 and enlarged in 1862. Modified by Thomas of Landora in 1870, he rebuilt it in the simple Gothic and Arts and Crafts style in 1884. The building is now a private house. Here is the Old Salem Independent Chapel, built in the simple round-headed style in 1855. The chapel closed in 1919, and the building housed the British Legion Hall for some time. That closed in the 2010s, and the building was derelict until 2021, when it was being converted to a private house. Here is the former Bethesda Chapel, built in 1828 and altered in 1848. The building used to have a miniature bell tower in the 19th century, but it disappeared sometime in the 20th century, I believe. The chapel was owned by the Presbyterian Church of Wales, and the chapel closed for worship in early 2019 due to falling congregation numbers. The chapel is currently being converted to a private house. Here is the Elim Calvinistic Methodist Chapel in the hamlet of Kevencock, built in 1839 and renovated at the turn of the 20th century. The vernacular-style building is situated 2 miles west of Llanrheadr in Mochnant. Here is the parish church of St. Thomas in Benabont, a Victorian building that was built to the designs of R.K. Penson in 1855. Situated by the confluence of the rivers Here, Nant and Tannet, the Victorian Gothic church consists of a nave and chancel, and the designer of this church was County Surveyor of Montgomeryshire 4 years after St. Thomas Church was built. The interior of the church is unique again, along the nave and chancel slightly being unequal in height. The nave has a boarded ceiling that is supported on arched trusses. I don't see this type of ceiling in churches often. The chancel includes 2 boards with text beside the east window, and the 10 Commandments is seen on the left board, while the Apostles' Creed and Lord's Prayer is on the right board. These boards are written in Welsh. The building was Grade 2 listed in May 2003. There was an independent chapel in the village back then, and this was situated by the Railway Inn. Known as Capel Bark, the building here housed the second independent chapel in 1832, the first being in 1782 where it was housed in a Georgian house. The building is now a private house. I am standing outside the parish church of St. Ginog in Llanginog, situated by the B4391 road west of Benabont. The building stands on a knoll above the buildings in the village. The church was first built in the medieval times, but the building was replaced by a Georgian building that was built from 1791 to 1792. This painting by John Ingleby was painted 2 years after the new building was completed. The church was rebuilt again in 1894 by William Spall of Oswestry, where he altered the building as well. The building was Grade 2 listed in May 2003, and the interior looks bland to me. The views from the churchyard are fantastic, where Craigryward can be seen in the background. Situated southeast of the church is the Carmel Methodist Chapel, built in the classical style in 1873. An earlier Methodist chapel was built on another site in November 1804, enlarged in 1840. Situated by Llangynog Bridge, the building was replaced by Congregational Ebenezer Chapel in 1895, now a private house. Another chapel in the village is the Penewell Calvinistic Methodist Chapel, built in 1826 and rebuilt in 1868. The new stone building, in the subclassical style, is situated at the west end of the village, west of the parish church of St. Kynog. The church building here looks brilliant, and I can see why it was Grade 1 listed in January 1953. The Church of St. Mellangesh stands in a valley by the towering mountains of nearly 2,000 feet high. In the 6th century, the Prince of Powys awarded the valley to Mellangesh as a site of sanctuary. This happened in the year 553, and Mellangesh was an Irish virgin that was the daughter of an Irish king. After the Prince of Powys granted her land, she was abbess for 37 years until she passed in 590. Her shrine is situated in the chancel of the church, and the area has been a place of pilgrimage for many centuries. The shrine is reputed to be the oldest Romanesque shrine in the British Isles, and Mellangesh is the patron saint of hares. The chancel also houses the tomb of Iorwerth Drinman, the first legitimate child of Owain Gwynedd, King of Gwynedd. Born around 1130, he was known as the Flat-Nosed, and was killed in battle in Pennant Mellangesh. In the chancel is this panel, featuring plaster painting of the Apostles' Creed, Ten Commandments and Lord's Prayer, written in Welsh. Situated on the east side of the partition, this dates from 1791. Here is the Church of St. Elog in Hynant, built in 1886 by Lawrence Booth of Manchester. The original building on the site was medieval, but was mainly rebuilt in 1886, with the exception of the north stone wall. The building does not have listed status. The stone dressings, pulpit, altar rails and principals and spars for the roof were borrowed from the old church at Llanydin. The old church at Llanydin was demolished, along with the rest of the original village, in the late 1880s when the Lake Vyrnwy Reservoir was created. The site of the original village has been submerged for over 135 years. Despite this, a new church was built to the designs of F.W. Home in 1887. Consecrated on 5th of May 1888, the parish church is dedicated to St. Wyn, while the old church was dedicated to St. John. An interesting fact about the site of the new church is a graveyard was established here in the 1860s, so the site of this church was planned before the creation of the Lake Vyrnwy Reservoir. The interior of Llanydin Parish Church looks colourful to me, and the style of the building was built from the interpretation of the early Gothic style by the arts and craft movement. The stained glass windows are by Curtis, Ward, and Hughes, dating from the turn of the 20th century. The building was Grade 2 listed in February 2003. According to the Abandoned Communities website, there were two chapels in the village by the mid-19th century. They were the Bethel Calvinistic Methodist chapels, the first dating from 1821, and the second from 1875. The second building looked impressive, but it wasn't to last long, as it was demolished with the rest of the village a decade later, when the site was submerged. The chapel was rebuilt in 1889, built to the designs of T.G. Williams of Liverpool. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds refurbished the chapel in 2021, and it now houses a visitor centre for Lake Vyrnwy. Situated south of the village is this Sardis Independent Chapel, built in the simple Gothic style in 1822 and extended in 1896. This is by the B4393 road. Here is the Church of St. Mary at Pontlogel, built to the designs of Benjamin Ferry in 1854. Situated on a knoll, the building has an appearance of a rural mortuary chapel, and is situated by the B4395 road. Situated south of the settlement is the Salo Calvinistic Methodist Chapel, originally built in 1830. The second building, seen behind me, was built in 1873 in the simple Gothic style. It is situated by the B4395 road again. Here is the Church of St. Cadfan in Llangedfan, built in the 14th to 15th century on the site of an earlier structure for the church. The building was extensively restored to the design of Benjamin Lay of Welshpool from 1867 to 1868, and was Grade II listed in January 1953. The stone lychgate was built to the west of the church in 1810, although the building is not at the entrance anymore because the churchyard was extended in 1910. It's still good to see the building retained, and was Grade II listed in December 2002. There are a few chapel buildings in Llangedfan that are still intact, despite they are all private dwellings now. The building behind me is the Third Methodist Chapel of 1876, built in the simple round-headed style. The building is adjacent to the First Methodist Chapel in the village, and that was built by J. Jones of Hendy. The Second Methodist Chapel is situated southwest of the previously mentioned buildings, and this was built in 1842. This was converted to a house in 2019. Here is the Independent Chapel in the hamlet of Voyle, situated by the A458 road. This was first built in 1806 and enlarged in 1846. The building behind me replaced the first structure in 1866, and was renovated in 1901. I believe this is now a private house. Situated west of the hamlet is this stone church on a knoll, built in 1862 on the site of a medieval building. Dedicated to this saint, the original building on the site was limewashed before it was replaced by the Victorian building. This was Grade II listed in December 2002. Situated further west of Voyle is the last building I will look at in this episode. This independent chapel is situated by the A458 road, and this was built in the vernacular style in 1843. There was an earlier chapel building here in 1805. The chapel has been derelict for a few decades now, since it was derelict by 2002. I am at Lake Vyrnwy to end this episode, and this is one of the most well-known landmarks in North Powys. My last note is I struggled pronouncing some of the place names in this episode, since I am not a Welsh speaker. With that said, I enjoyed looking at the many religious buildings in northernmost Powys, and I will continue looking at them in the next episode.